welcome to BizTech's Enterprise Technology Show. Our guest for today is Chen Yu Bui. He's the Senior Vice President, APAC of SailPoint Inc. SailPoint Inc. is a leading global provider of identity security. Now, to tell us more about this, welcome to the show, Bui.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having us over here on your show.
Now, Bui, SailPoint was started in 2005 and really very much a front runner and really early in the space. Walk us through its history and its presence in the Asia-Pacific region.
Right. So I think SailPoint has been around for 17 years. It's been a long history and just purely focusing on identity, right? I mean, that's what we do since the inception by our founder 17 years ago. And just a bit of overview, we have over the last 17 years, taken more than 2,005 implementation across 65 countries for customers across the world. And if you kind of understand what identity security is about, it's about also being integrated and onboarding a lot of sources of identity and application. We have about 21,000 sources and application connected to a SailPoint platform across the world, and about 11 million identities under the management across several industries like banking, media, utilities, tech, financial, I mean, you name it, right? Cross industry basically, right? And we operate across the world. We have a huge extensive partner network working with global SIs, local SIs. And in Asia, for example, we work with people like partners like Napoleon, or the what we call the global SIs like Accenture, PwC, Deloitte, the likes of that in KPMG, right? We also work very closely with the tech alliance partner like CyberArk, Proofpoint, Beyond Trust, and others in what we do. From APAC perspective, we have been in the region for the last 7 years and very much invested in this region. We have a good team across many countries, with people from sales, from technical, from support, from professional services, and sort of customer success. So if you look at it, we really have been very much in the region with the customers and supporting our customers over the last 7 years.
Now, Bui, I want to get your insights and perhaps you breaking down the identity security and access management into a 101. Help us to understand what this is all about. Why is this important?
Right. Well, if you kind of let's take a step back into time, right? 17 years ago, identity management really is very much about governance, right? It's like, how do you know somebody have the right access to the right applications, and you got to then do the certification, make sure it's okay. Especially in the banks, for example, how do you know if you, Brian, works in the bank, that you have got the right access to the right system, and your boss certified that you have got the right access to the right system, right? So that's how it works. Started it's like as governance. But as time evolves, you will see that the identity management it's moved very much from governance into now very much in a core of, basically an enterprise cybersecurity position. And it's actually driven from many, many changes you see happening in the market, right? And what happens is that, the way people work has changed tremendously, right? And if you look at the last 3 years, and 3 years has been, while it's a short time, but 3 years is also very long, and many things has happened in the last 3 years, right? So, and some of these things has accelerated in the way companies and enterprises change the way they actually operate and transform, right? 3 years ago when the pandemic started, you remember this, you probably remember this in the days when it first started. I remember that businesses are running out there to buy laptops, VPN licenses, all to cater for business continuity. As a consumer, if you go out there and try to buy a laptop at that point in time, it's almost impossible in the first few months of the pandemic.
Correct.
You remember those days, right? It was crazy. But it actually tells you one thing, right? It actually accelerated the way business operate because they have to adapt, right? There were big changes that happened, and it's still happening today. For example, changes in the working habit. Right? If you take a step back, in the past, when you talk about work, it's really all about on-prem. You sit in the office, you do your work, but now the working habit has changed, right? People have now moved from, being on-site to remote working, now to hybrid working style, right? And that's not going to go back, right? That trend basically are irreversible. It's going to just continue to move forward. Now people are talking about hybrid workspace and so on and so forth. Now, what that bring about is that your enterprise environment has now changed, right? The mindset has always been, to protect your enterprise, as long as you have a what you call a gated environment. As long as people go through the gated environment, you should therefore consider them to be secured and therefore have access to all your resources. But think about this now, you are accessing your environment now, you're allowing your workers to work from home and accessing your environment remotely. Now, what that does is that you are now extending their vulnerabilities from their home environment into your enterprise. So if you think about it a little bit more, the enterprise security has evolved then, because the perimeter security, the firewall and whatnot, is no longer just as effective, right? And therefore, identity is now becoming the centerpiece of enterprise security, right? Enterprise security is no longer just about protecting the endpoint and network, but it's really about when somebody gets into your network, how do you know that this person is, who he say he is, and he has got the right access to the technology he needs to access to, right? And therefore, this whole shift is now moving very much into what they call identity security, right? People talk about zero trust security architecture. It's not a new term. It's been around for many years. But what has happened is that over the last 3 years, this has accelerated in a big way. And identity is actually right in the center of it all, right? So that's one aspect of that change. Now, how do you make identity the new firewall, and hence the term identity security? Right? So that gives you a bit of the thing. Then, of course, there's the other part as well, where you talk about over the last 3 years, besides the working habit, you will also see a change in the workforce, right? A workforce mix. We're not just talking about remote worker versus on-prem worker, right? But think about it. There's also this whole movement called the gig economy. Contractors on the rise, right? And then in the last 3 years as well, you heard a lot about digital workers, right? People are putting RPA boards in play. All of these are basically identity. And you think about it, to be able to manage them, give them the right access at the right time, no more, no less, is very important, right? And that's really how the evolution has happened over time, where the move from a perimeter security has now translated into more an identity at the core, and changing the way enterprise security are now being viewed and be kind of implemented.
Now, so this is interesting, because we understand that for large enterprises in particular, and let's use the financial services industry as an example, they've always been cognizant of the value of restricting access and security. However, today, as you said, because of this fundamental shift in the way we are working, smaller enterprises are impacted as well. And with the rise of ransomware and bad actors globally, and particularly in Southeast Asia, where the awareness of the need for cybersecurity is only now becoming heightened, how do you see this happening across industries that perhaps traditionally were not so concerned about identity management and security?
That's a very good point and question, Brian. I think it used to be cybersecurity is of key focus in industry like financial, very important, right? But if you look at it, because of the pandemic, because there's the way businesses and their customers consume their product and services has changed. A lot of organization has also need to evolve and survive, and they drive an accelerated digital transformation just to survive, right? And banks included, and even to the smallest mom and pop shop, right? Basically, just think about it. During the lockdown, people are now having to kind of order food and then get it delivered. Right, the mom and pop shop in the past, you come to the shop and buy stuff, but now you have to order online, and everything is now basically going very much digital, right? Now, because of that change itself, what we found out, companies are accelerating their digital transformation. They're modernizing their environment. All industry, across all industry, medium-sized and large enterprises, they're all doing it. But what we found out as well is that in the haste to accelerate that digitalization, they have not caught up, their security posture have not caught up with this acceleration in digital transformation. And that in itself created a whole bunch of risks, right? Because you're increasing, when you digitize, you accelerate digital transformation, your attack surface actually goes up. But how do you change and modernize your enterprise security to be in sync with the digital transformation? That is very important. Now, if you look at some data stats, for example, in terms of, there was a report that came out from, what do you call this, FireEye and McAfee last year, right? It actually says that 81% of global enterprises sees an increase in cyber attack and cyber incidences, right, during the pandemic, right? So we do know that during the pandemic, it has gone up quite significantly. And one of the other things that we also realize as well is that if you look at another report by IDSA, it's called the Identity Defined Security Alliance. It says that 84% of cybersecurity breaches in the world are identity related. So that tells you that, you know, the importance of identity is so important now, right? So two things will happen, right? One is that the security needs to evolve and accelerate into a transformation to catch up with the digital transformation. That's one. And what evolution we're talking about, that basically means that they have to now go beyond perimeter security into, you know, zero trust principle security and, you know, and identity security at the core of the enterprise security. The other thing that they do need to kind of think about as well is that how do they continue to actually put in the policy that ensure that that can happen, right? I think that's going to be very important, right? So you asked me, why are the other industry seeing a necessity to kind of evolve? And this is really it, because they are all transforming digitally, and you actually see this becoming a big, you know, impetus for them to make that transformation. I'll give you one use case, right? One example of where this has actually been a very famous breach that happened in the US. Colonial Pipeline. I don't know whether you heard about it.
Yes.
Pipeline, yeah, it's the American company that delivered, you know, gasoline and jet fuel to the southeastern US, right? And last year May, I think they had a big ransomware attack, right? And they were actually you know, ransomware. They had to pay 4.4 million to restore their 5,005 pipelines, right? But even though they paid the ransomware just within a matter of hours after they were attacked, it still took them weeks to restore it, right? But the quick question here is that what actually were the cause of that? The cause of that is actually the attacker was able to find a credential of one of the employees from another web, use that to penetrate a VPN and created that hack, right? So this is but just one example. If you really kind of think about it, 84% of the world breaches are identity related. So if you apply that to, you know, to the volume of attack you have, you know, identities become very, very crucial and important, right?
So, Boy, one of the things that you also published now, SailPoint published a report titled "The Horizons of Identity," and this is focused on the APAC countries. And one of the conclusions was that many companies are in a relatively early stage in their identity journey. Could you share with us some of the insights that came out of that? Because that's quite alarming then, given all the threats that are out there.
Right, exactly. So it wasn't just for APAC. Actually, we actually had this study and what we call the maturity model build out. It's called a 5 horizon of identity journey, right? And we surveyed we work with and surveyed with about 350 large enterprises across the world, with about 12 to 15% of that coming from APAC region, right? And what we found out is that 45% of the companies are actually in what we call insufficient stage horizon 1, right? So let me take a step back and give you a bit of perspective, right? There are 5 horizons in total, right? And if you look at it, the 5 horizon basically comprises of horizon 1, where it's really company just at the start of this whole identity journey, and they don't really have a very strategic approach. They are very much fragmented across the organization. People do stuff because they have to solve one particular problem. Say, for example, an audit problem, right? And then Horizon 2 is where the company say, hey, you know, I realize that identity is important and I have to go do something about it. But it's still very much manual, right? And it's, you know, they started on a journey, but a lot of things are still done pen and paper, you know, Excel spreadsheet, right? Somebody keep an Excel spreadsheet, somebody says, Brian, you know, in this company has access to these 5 applications, you know, you know, you kind of manage it that way, right? You get the idea. And then Horizon 3 is when people realize that, hey, you know what? This can't go on, because manual, not only that the work is way beyond human capacity, it also has an inherent risk to it because of human error. So people started on this whole digitalization of the identity security journey, right? So they start putting platform and, you know, solutions in there, which is you know, helps them to kind of manage it, and it's at scale, right? They started on that journey. Horizon 4, and this is where it gets interesting. Horizon 4 is when you look at it and say, okay, I'm using advanced digital tools and also predictive use cases, right? So what it means is that one of the key things that I will share a little bit as well is that the trend is happening is that earlier I mentioned about the number of the mix of digital workforce and the workforce, right? It actually contributes to really a rise of the different mix of identity, but also the rise of number of identity. Just think about it. The OT, each OT device is one identity. If you kind of spread it out, the number of identity is huge, right? And if you start thinking as well that as you drive digital transformation, you know, the number of resources, technology resources, platform, application you put in continue to increase at a very big, high rate. And if you apply the zero trust principle of never trust, always verify to this huge scale, very soon you're going to be way beyond human capacity. And that's what Horizon 4 is about, right? Anticipating that huge volume of management you need to do on the, you know, on the identity and the ability to access to what technology. You require some level of modern, you know, platform that's driven very much by AI to give you that predictive part of it, right? And that's where Horizon 4 is. Horizon 5 is all about, you know, very extended and united identity strategy across. Horizon 5 is kind of a utopia, right? I think across the 300 over 50 people customer we work with, there's 0% there at this point in time. So just give you a bit of mix, 45% Horizon 1, about 29% Horizon 2, 20% Horizon 3, about 6% Horizon 4, right? And 0% Horizon 5. So that's kind of what the mix is, how it looks like, and the different horizon maturity.
Okay, Boy, then let me ask you this. I'm a CIO from Indonesia. I run a large enterprise with multiple subsidiaries. I really am probably straddling Horizon 2 and Horizon 3. So I'm starting my digitization journey. Yes, I have traditional ERP solutions, CRM solutions, and so forth, but I'm really upskilling. What are give us a 101 on what I need to do to ensure that my business is protected?
Yeah, I think the first thing first is really to take a step back and ask yourself, right? Whether my approach to enterprise security, firstly, is it looking at from the right lens? Are we still looking at perimeter security, or are we now accepting the fact that perimeter security alone doesn't protect us, but really looking at identity security? I think that's going to be the first step, understanding that identity is your most critical control point for enterprise security. That's the first step, right? And the second step, you're going to look at, you know, what do you have right now in your system, right? You say that I've started on Horizon 2, maybe Horizon 3 and 4 in between, right? So you might already have some sort of identity management platform in place, but chances are they are legacy in nature, right? And that means that you need to ask yourself, right? If I were to kind of modernize it, what exactly what exactly are things that I got to look at, right? And to me, really modernizing the legacy identity management platform is about answering these few questions, right? Can the platform address how the workforce dynamic has evolved, and what does it mean for technology access, right? You have all the new multi-cloud environment and everything. And what does it mean for the different type of identity that need to be managed and secured, right? And how do they how does the platform allows the identity team or cybersecurity team you have in your organization to be able to get out of react mode, but get in front of identity security requirements that are driven by your digital transformation initiative, rather than just be reacting to threat and attack, right? So if you think about it, there are three core components of a modern identity security, you have to consider, right? One is that whatever you're going to put in place, it needs to firstly has the right intelligence, right? The deep intelligence is important because you need to have a platform that gives you 360-degree view and deep insight to all your identity and their access need. That's the first thing you're going to have, right? Second, you have to be able to have it to be autonomous, right? Autonomous because you look at the volume and scale you're going to manage. It needs to be autonomous so that you can speed up your decision, make it easier, and free up your identity team to focus on the more critical things to do, right? And third, it has to be able to seamlessly integrate it into your IT infrastructure so that you can embed the identity context into your entire digital ecosystem, right? And that's going to be critical. So all these three are needed so that you can evolve. If you're the CIO of this company, you can evolve and adapt to the increasingly complex environment you operate in, and do it at a scale that matches your business. So that if you look at this key tenet of a modern identity security solution, it means that you need to be looking at something that is built on, firstly, a platform that is built on data intelligence and be able to be powered by AI so that you can actually do that, the predictive, your ability to catch the outlier. Like, for example, one of the things that we do very well is that with our AI, so firstly, our platform was built basically on a AI platform, right? And with the data intelligence. And then on top of that, we have all the platform services like the workflow, the autonomous automation and all these things. But more importantly, one of the things that we have is what we call the outlier detection, right? If you're a bank, for example, you know that every quarter, every month, probably you have to do a certification process, right? You got to say, okay, this 50 employees of mine have access to this number of applications. Each one of them, I would say certified, they are supposed to have all this access. Over time, it gets very tiring, right? Do you really look at all those certifications? It becomes a rubber stamping process. So everybody just kind of say, okay, certify. It puts a risk, right? Now, with AI, what we do with Outlier is that when we run that platform, the AI will pick up and say, okay, out of the 50 people in your team, right? You shouldn't worry about the 45 of them because they are all pretty much standard. But here's 5 that's outlier. Now you can't do that without an AI, right? Because what the AI does is that it then pulls out the outlier for you, tells you these people as compared to their peer are outlier, and then you be able to drill down further and say, why are they outlier? Maybe because he has five unique access, which none of his peer has it. Now, then what you do is that then you don't have to ask your managers to then do the approval for that, but just kind of focus on those 5 which are outlier and figure out what to do with them. Are they can we certify them, or do we need to kind of shut them out, right? So that's one aspect of it. So back to your point, right? If you look at that, then how do you ensure that you choose a systems and solution that allows you to kind of have that predictive aspect of it all? Yeah.
Now, wait, I wanna now zoom in on SailPoint. We're just on the cusp of 2023. What should we be watching out for from SailPoint in this coming year?
You will continue to see us continue to innovate on those things. I mean, what I share with you are just some of the innovation we just recently launched, right? AI has been a very key part of what we will continue to build on. In fact, the innovation over the 17 years is to kind of move from a very back office technology, just managing access of provisioning and so on and so forth, to really to the core and center of it all, right? And what we will continue to do is to focus on that. You will see that outlier, that I mentioned, the AI part is going to be key and center of it all. We're going to drive very tight integration into many different applications and sources within the organization. Like, for example, we will continue to drive integration into SAP environment, ERP environment. Right, today we have very tight integration of SAP security, what do you call the separation of duty, SOD. And then if you look at next year as well, we're going to extend it beyond SAP into other other ERP as well. So a lot of those continuously focusing on driving the extensibility and providing that seamless integration into many different applications as well.
Boy, it's been a really interesting conversation. I've actually learned a lot. But before we leave, any final thoughts I'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would say is that as a C-level of an organization, right? I mean, one of the things that you guys will all struggle with is really this very simple question, right? How do I balance this acceleration of digital transformation that drive business outcome fast, and at the same time making sure that we're secure, right? Because they're almost as a tension, right? As you go faster, as you go more secure, you have more things to do, right? So it is an age-old problem, right? The tension is going to be there. We think about that a lot, and we do believe that this tension can be managed and should be managed, right? And one of the common problem that many organizations will struggle with, as a mistake they make, is that they start to look at this identity as a one-off project versus a journey, right? And you need to think about it as a journey because it's a continuous evolution, right? You can't start off this project and say, okay, I'm done, right? Because if you look at a bank, for example, with 5,000 applications and 50,000 employees, right? Onboarding that 5,000 applications into your identity security environment will take multi-years, right? So it's a journey, it's an evolution. Now, one of the things that I would urge all C-level executive in company to think about is that don't make a mistake of thinking of identity security program in a way that is too shallow, too narrow, and too short. What I mean by that, let me unpack that a little bit for you, right? So what it means is too shallow. Too shallow, it means is thinking of identity security just purely from the perspective of trying to solve an audit problem, as an example. We all know that solving an audit problem doesn't make it
just a band-aid solution in terms of that. Looking at it as a band-aid.
Yeah, right, exactly. So solving audit problem, you can pass with flying color, and yet you still would have an identity security issue, right? So that's to me is looking at it being too shallow versus rather than deep, right? The other one is looking at it too narrow versus then wide, right? So I think that is very important, right? So what I mean by that is that looking at it as the swim lanes of just protecting an access or protecting the privileged access, rather than looking at it in totality, right? We all know that you can't just look at giving a key to somebody to go into your environment, but not telling them which room they can go into. Right? And that's what access management is about. So you have to look at it in totality. The other issue is really looking at it too short versus long, right? And this is actually stemmed from the fact that many companies started off with a good vision, but because of the implementation tends to be on the legacy system, and they are hard and heavy and monolithic, and after a while becomes too difficult. So what happened is that most of the company decided then to just kind of abandon that brand vision and then just focus on applying identity security to only the most prominent resources and most prominent application to a small set of users. But you and I know is the most insignificant identity and access point that becomes the biggest threat in the organization, right? So I think, so my last point is that don't compromise, right? I think you need to understand that to address this thing in totality, you need to really look at it in a full comprehensive approach overall. So hopefully that will give you a bit of an idea on how the world has changed from an enterprise security perspective.
Boy, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show. It was very enjoyable.
Thank you. Thanks, Brian.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Chen Yu Boy, the Senior Vice President APAC of SailPoint Inc. on BizTech's Enterprise Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.